I spent my childhood watching cartoons. Yes, all of it. And I've never really regretted that. I had a wonderful time and I learned a lot in the process. But as people tend to do with things, as I got older, I kind of outgrew it. I stopped watching them in exchange for other totally different stuff. Until a couple summers ago, I was staying with an aunt and uncle in Ohio for an internship. And one day my cousins, they're like 3 and 5, came up to me like, "Hey Asher, do you want to watch Tom and Jerry with us?" And I was just like, "Yes, I want to watch Tom and Jerry with you." So we're sitting on the couch watching Tom and Jerry. It's like my old favorite. And I'm like really excited for a couple of seconds, and then I see what's actually going on screen. So to anyone unaware, Tom and Jerry are a cartoon cat and mouse, and they don't get along very well. They drop anvils on each other, pianos, they light dynamite, all the classic cartoon violence kind of stuff. The show I saw wasn't doing that. They were talking to each other, they were friends. Like, what happened? That's not what I grew up with. So I started doing some research, and it turns out this kind of transition isn't really an uncommon thing with modern cartoons. So if you go back to like the dawn of early animation with stuff like Betty Boop in the 1930s, it was totally a normal thing for characters to just die and go to hell in the middle of an episode. It was the olden days, that was just something people did, I guess. And that stayed in style until right when I was a kid. Like, I saw a ton of shows that did that totally normally. Hercules, Cow and Chicken, Courage the Cowardly Dog, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Tom and Jerry, Ren and Stimpy, The Looney Tunes, just to name a few. It's not until like the 1940s, early 50s that you get what you really think of as cartoon violence. That's people lighting dynamite on each other, the anvil drop, like the kind of thing you think about. And for close to 50 years, it just didn't go out of style. Like, it was funny that whole time, and yeah, people stopped and questioned it. Should we be showing this to kids? But it never really stopped until I was a younger kid. And now you'd think things would get kind of maybe a little more sensitive over time, more caring, just the opposite. So to anyone who knows Rocko's Modern Life, yeah, there's an episode in which the main character briefly works at a sex line. For copyright reasons, I can't show the actual screenshot, but it looks just like that, I promise you. There's an episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog that's all about, I kid you not, a young woman running away from her abusive boyfriend to run off with her lesbian lover. I didn't believe it either. I had to rewatch the episode. I still don't really believe it. And as much as I tried to recreate that one with stock photos, I just couldn't. And if you go back to the Tom and Jerry episode, the whole Tom and Jerry thing, there's an episode where the whole plot is Tom being sent to hell, but more on that later. So my question became, how do you get away with that? Like, if you think I'm being too harsh, I had seen all of this before I knew how to read, and that wasn't an uncommon thing either. It turns out the answer is a little simpler than you might think. It's just that kids don't always know what's going on. Like, if you show them a red man with horns surrounded by fire, they don't know who that is. Show a character talking on a phone saying, "Oh baby, oh baby, oh baby," they don't know what he's doing. Violence didn't fit into that for me, though. You show someone punching someone else, dropping an anvil, another heavy object, everyone knows what's going on. And I don't know if you guys know this, but kids are very, very impressionable. I'm not sure if you know this little tidbit, but if you do drop an anvil on someone, it will kill them. So how do you get away with that? You show so many violent things, you show it as funny, and you never show any consequences. Or do you? Let's go back to that Tom and Jerry episode I mentioned, the one where Tom goes to hell. So the plot of the episode is Tom and Jerry are up to their usual shenanigans. The cat and the mouse are chasing each other around when Tom gets a piano dropped on him for about the dozenth time. Except in this episode, it actually kills him, which is kind of your first clue you're not in for a normal episode. You see him go up a stairway to heaven and go up to a cat version of St. Peter at the gate, who says to him, "Hold on, buddy. You can't come in here. You've been torturing this mouse the last 40 episodes. Tom does get an exception, though. he's given a little slip of paper that reads, quite simply, "I forgive everything." And if he can get Jerry to sign it, it'll all be okay. It'll be like it never happened. He can go to heaven. It's all good. And he can't do it. Jerry doesn't forgive him in time, and as promised, you see Tom go into hell, into a burning cauldron with devil characters everywhere. Like, zero holding back on that. And it turns out this kind of thing isn't really uncommon. There's an episode of Popeye in which he's actually put on trial for assault. Yeah, it's funny watching him eat spinach and beat people up, but it almost got him a life sentence. Like, I really can't overstate how shocking that kind of episode is. Like, there's nothing serious about Tom and Jerry. It's a cat and a mouse fighting. And yet they take everything and throw it out just to show you the consequences of what they're doing. Now, before I go on, I do want to address one little thing about violent cartoons, namely in relation to kids. So the thing is, kids have parents. And if the kids are watching violent cartoons, the parents are able to step in and say, "Hey, I don't really like what you're watching. Can we change the channel?" And aside from that, networks also take very good care of what they do and do not show. And the big example I have of that is Ren and Stimpy Season 2, Episode 2, Man's Best Friend, otherwise known as the Banned episode. I think you can kind of see where I'm going with this. So when I asked Viacom if I could use the episode they banned from airing in a TED Talk, they weren't very friendly about it. So I'd like to give special thanks to some of the brothers of Alpha Epsilon Pi for helping to reenact this. So the general plot of Ren and Stimpy is you have these two dogs, Ren and Stimpy. Ren's kind of smart, Stimpy not so much. And in this episode, they decide they want to get adopted. They want to be pet dogs. So they go off and they get adopted by this guy named George Liquor. You know this is going to go fantastic. And things don't go so great. George tries to teach them a bunch of tricks. Now, Stimpy is very good. He gets the hang of it right from the get-go. Ren, not so much. He's not very good at what he's asked to do. He doesn't get a lot of treats. So at the end of the episode, George decides he wants them to be defense dogs. But before they can learn to defend, they have to learn to attack. Do you see where this might go wrong? He's standing there with an oar, we didn't have oars handy, ready to beat the holy hell out of him. And he does. Even if I had copyright permissions for this, I don't think I'd be able to show the whole clip. During the beating, George gets battered, bruised, very, very graphically. His eye pops out of his head, and the whole time Ren keeps going. Eventually, he falls unconscious, and Ren keeps hitting him. And the whole time, Stimpy's there begging him, "Ren, stop! What are you doing?" To which Ren replies very curtly, "Shut up, you're next." And that whole scene ends with this iconic and honestly terrifying scene of Ren standing over George's unconscious body, laughing. Now, I know that was kind of a comical recreation of it, but I assure you, in episode, it was horrifying. So after all that, what happens? Does Ren get yelled at? Does he not get any treats? Does he get kicked out? Well, no. Ren does what he's asked to do, so he gets a treat. They all do. And the episode ends with the three of them dancing happily for the camera. And that's it. That's the end of the episode. No consequences, nothing further. It ends then and there. When Nickelodeon saw this, they were furious. They said, "We can't air this, you're insane," and fired the current showrunner of Ren and Stimpy, the guy who had created the show himself. What did he do so wrong? Well, the trick is he didn't show any of the consequences of the violence. Whereas a lot of the older cartoons, the good ones, showed Tom going to hell, Popeye on trial when they're violent about things. This one didn't. It showed them getting rewarded. Now, I think I know what you're all thinking right now. You know, Asher, I love hearing you babble about your favorite cartoons, but what does this have to do with me? Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'm getting there. In the meantime, it's time to look into our mystery box. Oh, it's an apple. Now, this apple has been poisoned. Ignore the fact that it looks tasty and that I bought it this morning poisoned. Let's say it has to stay in the room with all of you, but I have to leave. How can I stop anyone from dying? Now, I see two options. One, I could take it, explain the apple, and tell you, hey, it looks great, but it's not, don't eat it. Or I could maybe try to hide it and just hope no one ends up finding the damn thing. I think it's human nature to take the second option, which is what a lot of the newer cartoons do. Rather than talk about violence, something controversial, they're willing to simply hide it and not talk about it. And it's around now that I feel like you should be realizing that maybe this wasn't really about cartoons. I think it's a natural habit of people to not talk about things that they find uncomfortable. It's easier that way, and in a lot of ways, it just makes life a little smoother. But you don't get anything out of that. In fact, you lose a lot. I'm here today to encourage all of you to talk about things that make you uncomfortable. Have a look around, because you will find that there are a lot of ideas that have already been hidden from you very effectively. And if you're brave about it, approach them as they are and have a good look, you just might find that they aren't really so scary and so dangerous after all. Well, I've never been so nervous eating a banana. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm just a guy who watched too many cartoons on Netflix last night and then decided to give a TED Talk. I leave that much completely and totally up to you. But I encourage you, talk about what makes you uncomfortable. Watch an old cartoon. Look for the hidden fruit, and have a great day. Thank you.